Hello. Welcome to our April conversation of women in blended families. My name is Gayla Grace. I serve on the Family Life Blended team, where our ministry is all about serving blended families. And if you haven't joined us before, we're live the second Tuesday of every month at 3 p.m. Central on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube on the Family Life Blended page. We have a different guest, we have a different topic every month. And today, the focus of our conversation is on adult step families. When children are adults from the beginning, when the family comes together. And adult step families experience as many transitions as those with young kids, but we're often not prepared for that. We're surprised by some of the transitions and the challenges. And we are going to talk about that today. But before we get started, I would like to know who is with me. I love to see who has joined me live and would love for you to put a comment up if you are watching. Give me your name, tell me where you're watching from. And I'm also curious if you got to watch the eclipse yesterday. If you did, maybe tell me, where did you watch it from? I don't know about you, but for us here in Arkansas, it was a pretty cool ordeal. And I watched it from our back deck with my husband, Randy. And it was just pretty special, in my opinion. I didn't know what to expect. We were told there was going to be all kinds of crowds coming into Arkansas for it. And I'm not sure there were as many people as they thought, but I still thought it was pretty cool. So I have had people already telling me, we have a first timer from Tampa, Florida. Yes, I love to see those who are new, maybe are just hearing about us for the first time. And Robin from Ontario, always glad to see that. That's awesome. And ladies, as you come on, you might want to tag a friend also who you know would benefit from our conversation. Even if they can't join us now, they can always watch the recorded version later. And then also remember, we do take questions. We love to answer questions from those who are watching. So if you want to ask something about our topic, you can throw that question up at any time. I'm seeing several who have come on, Veronica from Arizona, and we have Stacy from Oregon, Melody from Connecticut. I have one who says she missed the eclipse, but there's several, depending on where you live, you just might not have had that opportunity. And others, Danielle from the UK. Wow, I love that. Technology allows us to view these types of broadcasts from many different places. So, love having those on and telling me where you're from. That's pretty awesome. So you can continue to let us know that. I'm going to get started. I want to bring our guest on and begin to talk about our topic today. But our guest today is Jan Mathews. Jan has been married to her husband Steve for 11 years, and they serve on staff with Family Life Blended also. Their sole focus is loving and equipping step families. And when Jan married Steve, he had 4 adult kids. And we are going to talk about some of the road that Jan has walked as a stepmom with those adult children. Jan is a credentialed pastor. She's a certified coach, a grief specialist, a funeral officiant, a speaker, and an encourager. And she's passionate about seeing marriages and lives changed in step family life. Jan, I love that. Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Gayla. It's great to be with you, my friend.
Well, it is good to see you, and I know you have a lot to offer on our topic today about adult step families. So let's just jump in. I'm curious, Jan, when you and Steve married, tell me how old Steve's kids were when y'all married.
The youngest was 19 and a freshman in college. The youngest was 19 and the oldest was 27.
Okay.
3 sons and a daughter.
3 sons and a daughter. All right. And you have no kids of your own, correct?
Correct.
All right. And I know you say we figured that they were all adults, there would be no problems. And that wasn't the case. You found that it was hard. So I'm curious, Jan, what you would describe as your biggest struggle in the beginning as you navigated into this family.
Well, I often say um, look at me, what's not to love?
Oh, I love that.
And, you know, as Steve would say, I expected, because I love Jan, that my kids would love her right away too.
Right.
Well, the kids did not know me at all.
Mhm.
So I had expectations that only caused disappointment.
Mm.
I
Okay.
did I expected, first of all, that the kids wouldn't be impacted. Uh, that was definitely not correct. They were very impacted. And I don't know really what my expectations were as far as my relationship with them, but everything changed as soon as we got married. And I realized how hard this was for
Mm.
everyone.
Right.
Hard for me too.
So, was it different than when y'all dated as opposed to when you married? Do you feel like things changed then when you married?
Yeah, it really did, because when we dated, the kids weren't really that much of a part of our dating life.
Okay.
And so when we got married, the kids were so gracious at our wedding. Our wedding was this beautiful occasion. It was a happy day, and they were all in that front row being so gracious, but it was a day of loss for them.
Oh, wow.
It really was.
Okay. And I think that's because the finality of when we marry, then all of a sudden these kids realize things are really changing here, right?
That is correct. And Steve was a single dad for 8 years, and
Okay.
so he was very close. I mean, he's still close to all the kids, but he was really close to them, and they were his life. And
Mm,
suddenly his whole focus became me.
right. Hmm. Yeah, and so I think what happens is, and we talk about this even with young kids, that it feels like another loss for them. So it
Right.
is a loss when parents divorce, and then it feels like another loss when the kids marry because now those relationships change. And it sounds like that's what you're saying.
Yes, they really did change. And I
Mhm.
don't think the kids saw that coming either. You know, when
Mm,
Christmas came around and they had their traditions that they had always done every year, and I didn't know those traditions, but those traditions were important to them. There was just heartache all the way around.
right. And so how did you manage that? How did you manage those traditions? What did you do?
You know, honestly, before all that long, Steve got this email from Family Life about the Smart Step family and thought, we need that. We started a Smart Step family group, and I got my hands on the Smart Stepmom book. And everything changed for me when I began to realize this is pretty normal stuff.
Mm,
This isn't just us. This is normal. And I began to realize that I don't need to take this personally. I wanted to be a part of this family, and I wasn't a part of this family. And I could not expect to be a part of that family instantly.
right.
It took a lot of time. And so I think I was able to manage it more when I began to realize, you know, you listen to other couples and you realize this is not so abnormal.
Right.
I can do this.
Hmm. Yeah, I like the encouragement that you got from being a part of a small group. And the other thing that's
Sure.
interesting, Jan, is it's not like y'all have been married a long time and you would consider yourself an expert in step families, but y'all jumped right in and
Oh,
started. You wanted to be a part of a group. And so you just started one yourself. And I think
yeah.
that's great for people to understand that these small groups can be invaluable for step families, and if you don't have one available, then you can start one, even if you
Yeah.
don't feel like you've been down the road very long.
That's very true, because we always say with the Smart Step Family curriculum, and we've been running those for 11 years that we've been married, almost 11 years. And the great thing is you don't have to be an expert. Ron Deal is the expert on those videos, so we don't
Right,
have to be. And
right,
so we just can share common experiences and just
right.
facilitate.
Yeah. And I also know that you talk about feeling like an outsider in the family. And I think that's a very common dynamic. And I'm wondering, what did you do? How did you navigate that, those feelings that you had?
Well, I lived in a lot of pain for a while.
Mm.
I went to my room a lot and cried, honestly.
Oh.
It was hard. It was really hard, but
Mhm,
now I understand it better.
mhm.
And I just had to learn this is not personal. And I also had to learn the kids needed time with dad.
Right.
And I learned that the best gift I can give is to step aside and say, hey, why don't you guys go, whatever. And also just not be offended or hurt when they want to go do something without me and enjoy the time I have while they're doing that.
Right.
That
I
was
think
freeing for me.
and that is a very important point, even more so for adult step families. I feel like, we often think that we want to build these relationships, and so we need to be a part of everything that happens as we build relationships. But the truth is, these kids still need time with their biological parent by themselves. And
They do.
so that was a gift that you gave them and that you gave Steve. And it sounds like that was instrumental in helping them, but also helping you, right?
Absolutely. And it did help Steve because it was really hard for Steve.
Mhm.
I think in all the groups we've done and the step couples we've worked with, I really have a lot of compassion for the bio dads in
Yes.
situations like ours
Mhm.
because he wanted all the people he loved to love each other. And he saw my hurt and he saw their hurt. And it was really hard for him too.
Right. And that's the thing that for women in blended families, there's also biological moms then who are in this place where they are parenting alongside a stepdad, and they do feel torn by their kids who they still love dearly and are trying to figure out how to have a relationship once they're married and yet also try to build a relationship with their husband. So it goes both ways. I mean, what you're saying, you were the stepmom, but there are some of the same dynamics then that go on with a biological mom and the stepdad. And so just for them to remember, it's great to continue to have one-on-one time with your biological kids, and that can help them feel like kind of bridge the gap of this loss that they are feeling. So I have a question here. Let's look at this that's come in from one of our viewers. What do you suggest I do if part of the family accepts me, but others don't? How do I deepen the relationships with the ones extending the olive branch, but not continue to offend those who are not ready, who might look at me spending time with their siblings as me overstepping? I love this question. And in fact, I was going to talk about this later because I think it's important for people to understand that if there are several children involved, which for y'all it was four, some might be more willing to form a relationship with a step parent quicker than others. And so, how do you handle that? And even perhaps what would you do differently or preparing for the wedding? So let's just start with the beginning of the question. How do I deepen relationships with the ones who are extending the olive branch without feeling like I'm offending others? What would you say about that, Jan?
I think one of the things that worked well for me was just expressing an interest in the things they're interested in.
Yes.
They weren't really interested in getting to know me or what I was about, my background. I could say all the wonderful things in the world about, oh, I've done this and I know this, and that is not how I
I don't care.
remember. I remember at our wedding, so many people from my church came up to the kids and said, "Oh, you must be so excited. Jan is such a great person." That really didn't help. So it's
Wow.
not about me and
Yes.
it's about them. And so if my agenda is to get them to accept me, that's my agenda. That's not their
That
agenda.
is so good.
And so I need to just be interested. I need to meet them at wherever they're at. And it can change, and all the kids can be in different places at different times.
Right.
But I have got to not let it be about me. And
Right.
that's probably the most important thing I would say about all of that.
Yeah, and also to remind people that the stepmom stepdaughter relationship sometimes can take longer because of the loyalty binds that they have with their biological mother. And so sometimes we have to realize it might take longer with a stepdaughter. Sometimes those stepsons are quicker to want to embrace us and get to know us. Not always, but sometimes. And it's okay, and don't, like you said, don't take it personally if some of them do want to draw you in and embrace a relationship with you and others don't. So that's, yeah, that's exactly what you're saying. So the next part of that question was, in hindsight, what would you do differently while dating or preparing for the wedding? maybe that's in relation to just as you are building relationships and wanting to build relationships, what would you do differently as you prepared? I know your story is you and Steve didn't date that long, right?
Right. And that was hard on the kids. We did not involve them in our dating. We did not involve them in our wedding planning. I would absolutely do that differently. Absolutely.
Okay. So you would date longer? You would, and what are you
Yes.
saying?
I would probably date longer, but I would also include them more in our times together. Um, they didn't know me at all, really.
Okay.
I just felt they're adults. I'm not going to, really, it was probably an unworthiness almost on my part. Like, they're not going to want me in their lives. I'm not going to be
Oh,
part of their life. I'm not going to, and that's so not true.
yeah.
And
Hmm.
as it turns out, it's wonderful for us now. But I think what I would probably do differently, also, the biggest thing I would do differently is don't take it all so personally.
Yes.
It was not toward me. It was not about me. They were trying to survive. They were trying to figure it out. And it wasn't up to them to have to figure it out.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and just to be secure in who you are, that your identity, it's not based on whether the stepchildren accept and love you. You are still a lovable person, even if they choose not to. And that it's all about just exactly what you're saying. We don't have to try to change ourselves or jump through hoops. We just try to get to know them and what ticks with them, what you have in common, um, all of those things, Jan.
One of the things that's the most fun for me, and it really was from the beginning, is getting to know them.
Mhm.
Whatever their interest is, whatever their job is, whatever, what do you like about it? Is why, how did you get into this? And really take an interest in. I love learning about them. It's not
Yes,
just because I want to build a relationship. It's because it's so fun to get to know them and to ask them those questions. And that builds relationship
right.
always.
Well, who doesn't love talking about themselves, right? I mean,
Right?
even adults, if you want to have a
Yep.
conversation with somebody and you ask about them, they're going to talk about themselves.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So even more so with kids. Well, let's go back to this outsider role that you talked a little bit. So what did you do to help so that you didn't feel like an outsider? Were there specific things that you were intentional about to help with that?
Well, I think that's kind of a team effort between Steve and I both,
Mm, okay.
to be a team,
Yes.
because he wanted it to be better. I wanted it to be. I mean, he saw me crying in my room enough times, and yet he can't go to his kids and say, "You need to love Jan." So I mean, he could have, but I don't think that would have gone so well.
No, 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 no,
Um,
not a good solution. Yeah.
but I tried to get comfortable as much as I could in together times. I can remember when the kids would come over for an event or a holiday and they would play a game. And I was so terrified that I wasn't going to know how to play the game and they weren't going to like me. And I was just like everything I could do not to cry and go to my room. I just took it so like, I don't know. I felt really like I need to be this magical, whatever it is, instead of just being like myself, just being
Right.
me,
Right.
and not taking it so personally. But Steve and I worked together with that because we realized that Steve needed to spend time with them without me. I realized that too. And so, in the times that we did things, I'll tell you the greatest thing really is either a game or a movie or something that's just fun. I mean, 'cause we're not going to sit around all day talk about how do you feel about me now,
Right.
and it's like let's just do life. Let's
Yeah.
just do life.
And find things that are non-threatening. That
Yes.
where you are doing things together, but you want it to be non-threatening, something that they enjoy. So as you find things that you have in common, if your stepdaughter likes to cook, you could cook in the kitchen, or I think it's for us stepmoms. Sometimes it's harder with the guys trying to find common ground, but we can, and all of that can help build relationship and just help them know that you consider them important to you, and then in
Mhm.
time, hopefully, they will reciprocate that.
Exactly. And I think too, wherever they are in their life, sometimes kids and parents have kids go into different lifestyles, they make different decisions, and parents get unhappy that, oh, I wish you would have done this or that. None of that. I get to just be their buddy. I don't have to
Exactly.
be any of that.
Right.
And that's kind of liberating if you think about it. The
Mhm.
parenting, really when they were this age, they still need parenting as far as, one of the kids called Steve today. He was working on a job and his dad, how do I do this? Because Steve was a handyman. Like, I
Oh,
love it when that happens, it's great.
right.
But it's really, really a process.
Right.
It has to be a process.
Right. And I know that you touched on expectations a little bit. I want to mention that because sometimes, especially with adult kids, they may not ever consider us as a stepmom to them, depending on how old they are when the marriage happens. They may consider the stepmom as, you're my dad's wife. Did you ever have those feelings that was, and did that matter to you? Did that feel different for you?
That was hard because I was never a mom. And so even the word stepmom bothered me because
Okay.
I am not any kind of a mom to them.
Okay.
Now they call me stepmom. It's been a few years. But I wasn't comfortable with any of those. I didn't know what I was supposed to be. That was really hard because I don't have kids. And even if there's a lot of other childless stepmoms out there right now, I can say, do you not like Mother's Day either? Mother's Day is a hard day.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
I actually, a guy in our group who was a childless stepdad, I asked him, is Father's Day as hard for you as Mother's Day is for me? And he said, oh, yeah. And I
Yeah.
thought, you know, it just is.
Yeah.
So stepmom became the common term. And sometimes now the kids will introduce us to someone and they'll say, these are my parents. And
Yeah.
it's not because they see me as their parent. It's just easier.
It is easier, and we
And
have to
so,
realize, yeah, it's hard for the kids too to try to figure out the complexity here and how do they introduce them. Yeah, I know, I totally get that. But I do think that just the whole expectations for us to really consider what are our expectations because they could be setting us up for disappointment, just like you mentioned earlier. So we wanna always be aware of that, especially with adult children. They're not in the home. They have their own lives and they just might not want to invest in a relationship. It doesn't mean that they never will, but it could just mean that it's going to take longer than you anticipate, and try to just accept where you are
yeah.
and then continue to work to work at relationships. Well, we've had a few more questions come in. Let's look at these, Jan. How can a stepmom repair after damage has been done? Stepchildren don't come around. I have no time to repair or connect from a distance. My husband is hurting.
So painful, so
Mm-hmm.
painful.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on the situation, sometimes if you can create a way to be together I have actually said to the kids, I am so sorry for the way that I handled things in the beginning. I didn't get it.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I handled this very well. And I really would love to, those are things that you can say. It's powerful when you can come back and say, I don't think I handled this well. Would you forgive me? Can we
Yes.
kind of have a new start? Can we, I don't care if you're not my best friend or I'm not your best friend, but can we have a commonality of relationship? I really want to honor you as, my husband's daughter or son, because you're right. You can do damage in the first year of your marriage that can take years to repair if you
Absolutely.
don't know some of
Right.
the concepts that we now know.
Yes. But I love that humble posture that you are suggesting. I think that is huge, especially with adult kids, because sometimes they already have opinions pretty fast about things,
I do.
and we can offend them quicker than we realize. We're not meaning to even, and sometimes we offend. So, Jan, I love that, just to present a humble posture that
Yeah.
can we have a do-over? I didn't know what I was doing in the beginning, but I want a relationship with you.
Yes.
And I think if they know that, then maybe they'll want to try harder. Yeah.
And usually, if you do offend them, what they do is they go to dad.
Yes.
And dad has to come to me and say, so and so was really upset because you said blah. And I would just be so devastated then, just so devastated.
Right.
And if I could go back now, I would probably do that more often, just to go back and say, sometimes though, I was not guilty at all. It
I
was
know.
just something I said,
I know.
but you can't prevent all of that. We need to give ourselves grace, Gayla. I mean, this is huge.
Yeah,
This is hard.
it is hard.
I mean, we do have to give ourselves grace. We also have to give our husbands grace,
Mhm.
because I can see, we stepmoms sometimes can see our husbands parenting in a way that we want to correct,
No.
you know,
Mhm.
and that is not our job.
No,
And
you're right.
but
With
it's a
adult kids.
battle. I mean,
Mhm.
we've worked with couples for 11 years. I talk to stepmoms all the time. It's probably one of the biggest battles there is. Like, how can you let your kids talk to you that way? Or why didn't you discipline him? And you know what? We weren't involved from the days when dad changed their diapers
Right.
and went through all of life with
Mhm.
them. We can't really even judge any of that. And it
Well,
causes conflict.
it does cause conflict, and single parent years, things happen during single parent
Yeah.
years that tug on your emotions, and you make decisions sometimes based on that. And, they can't go back and redo it. So there's no point in us judging and creating conflict in our marriage as a result of it. So yeah, I love what you're saying. And I think that, um, the next question kind of goes into that same thing where she says, do you continue to acknowledge his children even when they don't acknowledge you? And if so, how do you do that? I want to always say we want to be the adults in the relationship here. So, yes, I think we do continue to acknowledge them in ways that feel right for us. How would you answer that?
I would agree. I do think, though, that sometimes if kids really absolutely withdraw from you and they don't want contact with you, sometimes you have to let them be there.
Mm,
We can't fix everything.
we can't.
We can continue to, be interested in them. We can do a lot of things, but you can't always fix it.
Yeah, you can't. And I would say pray for their heart.
Yeah,
Um, we
absolutely.
can always pray for them
Mhm.
and pray that they would soften their heart towards us, but also pray for wisdom and discernment in how we navigate our relationship with them. And I do believe God will help us with that and give us answers as we try to, because the truth is, our husband wants us to have a relationship with his kids. I
Yes,
mean,
yeah.
that makes it harder for him if it gets to the point that there's just no relationship with us. And
Yes.
uh,
Although
yeah,
one thing that I have done a lot over the years is when I see something, whether it's a newspaper article, well, newspaper, who reads those anymore? Um, I,
you're dating yourself, Jan.
I am. I remember newspapers. But if I see something that's written about something that I know is super interesting to them, I will send them the article and just say, this just made me think of you. I
Right,
don't expect an answer. I don't expect, but I'm acknowledging them and
right.
something they really love and are interested in. And just to say, oh, I thought about you today. I heard this thing on the radio.
Hmm.
That is that's the minimum that you can do. You can
You can.
always do that.
Right, and then I think about things where, let's say that, they have a dog that dies or something to that. You very easily just send a text. In my opinion, texts are an easy way to reach
They
out to
are.
them and just say, "I'm so sorry to hear what happened. I'm praying for your heart," or whatever feels comfortable with your
Yeah.
relationship. But I think we continue to try to find non-threatening ways to reach out to them that just says, "I care about you. I'm thinking about you. I'm praying for you." And I think that's hard to turn down. Um,
I do send texts and messages sometimes, saying I'm praying. I have a certain day of the week when I pray for each one of the kids. That's not always welcome depending
mm,
upon where they are in their spiritual
yes,
life.
right.
So you have to also be,
Mhm,
I don't want to be I'm the super spiritual,
mhm.
whatever. So it does take some discernment.
It does.
But just to say I'm thinking of you, or you see a picture from the past, it's like, oh, dad said this was a really fun time you guys had when you went to Disney. It just came up
Right.
today. I thought you'd enjoy seeing it.
Yeah. Yeah. All of those things can make a difference. Okay, another question. Were you able to introduce any of your own holiday traditions, or did you have to sacrifice those because there were so many kids with well established traditions?
I would say I personally didn't have a lot of traditions at that point in my life, but I do think it's a process. And
Mhm.
I think maybe like if I would have just come in and tried to introduce new traditions in the very first year, I think it would have been hard for them.
Right, I
But
agree.
sometimes you give it a year or 2 years and let things integrate. I think the very first year, not a good idea. I
Right.
think,
No, I agree.
you know, so it's a timing, it's
Yes.
everything in its own time.
Right, yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, and that's sounds like someone who is interested in maybe being able to maintain some of their traditions, and again, I think we can
Mhm.
find commonality perhaps with our
Yes.
stepchildren with some of these traditions, and it might be welcome, it might be a way that we can bridge a gap a little bit with them, so, yeah, time. Don't do anything too quickly, but yeah,
Yes.
give it some time.
Very
Yeah,
much.
yeah, Jan, I wanna talk a little bit about, where I know you reached out to Steve's former wife about working together with his kids. Tell me a little bit about that. You wanted to honor her, right? And try to build a bridge. So describe that a little bit.
Yeah, I reached out to her, at a for a graduation we were attending of one of the kids, and I reached out and said, "Hey, can we sit together? Because why should the child have to call dad and then call mom and try to figure this is graduations, like thousands of people at the ceremony.
Right.
Let's just sit together so he doesn't have to figure it out." And we did, and we had a nice conversation. And I was the one that said to Steve and his ex-wife, "You guys need to do a picture so he can have both of his parents in a picture."
Oh.
And they did that. And I really, I have to say, if you can embrace the biological mom and
Mhm.
have a good relationship, that makes such a big difference.
I
I
agree.
really did try to honor her. The first year or two was hard because there, I don't know, it just didn't jive well for any of us. And she's their mom and they love her and I love her kids. And, after a lot of that happened, I sent her flowers on Mother's Day and said, "Thanks for sharing your kids. I love your kids."
Oh.
And now, when there's something happening with the kids, she and I will communicate back and forth. Honestly, it's easier for her and I to communicate back and forth than it is for my husband to communicate back and forth. First of all, I'm more of a communicator. And secondly, I don't have any of the history that they have.
Yes,
So
exactly.
I can be, I love your kids.
Mhm.
You have great kids. And now she says back to me, "Thank you for loving my kids. I love that they have you to love them." So
Wow.
and I know that, I mean, it took a while, it took some time, but that makes everything so much better for everybody.
It does, and I think that sometimes the tension that we feel in the relationships with our stepkids is because they have this loyalty towards mom,
Yes.
and they're trying to figure out, what does this really mean if I begin to like my stepmom? How is my
Right.
mom gonna handle that? And, they're just stuck in the middle trying to figure this out themselves, and if we can help with that, which is exactly what you did, but again, Jan, it was a humble posture of reaching out to her, just saying, "Let's all sit together." I mean, you didn't have to do that, but it makes it less awkward for everybody to just for the kids to realize I don't have to be with either my dad and stepmom or my mom. We can just all be together. And that in itself will help grow relationships with the adult kids.
It really does, even though they still always feel the tear. When we were traveling for one of the kids got married, and I remember one of the kids saying, "Well, my mom and her husband are doing this, and you guys are doing this, and I want to be with both of you." And we always say, "Go be with them. It's okay." We always release the kids. And she said, "I know I'm free to do whatever I want, but I want to do both. I feel so divided." So
Oh.
we can't always take that away.
Right. Yeah, we can't. And some of this, our kids they have to figure it out on their
I
own.
know.
Um,
Yeah.
and they can talk to their biological parent about it, is sometimes that's helpful. I don't know if they ever talked to Steve about some of these issues. Was that helpful, or does that
Yeah.
just pull Steve into the middle?
No, they did talk to Steve, and Steve was also really good about, honoring their mom, and, that I think that helped a lot of things too. He
Yeah.
was always very honoring with her
Yes.
and very, grace giving with the kids. Whatever you want to do, we'll work around it. And I think their mom is at that point too, where she'll work around us. It's just nice to have that. I mean, when
Oh,
you have that kind of thing going on,
it's
just
stressful for
it
everybody.
is.
Huh. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
No, I completely agree. So before we sign off, any other thoughts or hindsight that you would give as trying to build relationships with adult stepchildren? Any other things that you would touch on?
The only other comment I would make, and I wrote this down, that, in cases of divorce situations, when the kids have come through parents' divorce, there's nobody that comes out without scars from a divorce.
Absolutely.
Nobody.
Right.
And those scars will be there for a long time. And
Mhm.
so some things are beyond anything about us. And we just have to give grace for that.
Mhm. I love that. And we have to give grace to our spouse as they may not handle things the way we want all the time, and we have to give
Mhm.
grace to ourselves because we're
Yes.
not gonna get everything right either, but grace goes a long way, and I think that's a good thing to kind of wrap up our conversation with. I'm also gonna mention, for our viewers, there are a lot of podcasts out there that Ron Deal does, and
Yes.
there is one that was just released this week, podcast number 135 with Kim Walker Smith. And she is a singer-songwriter and actually has an incredible story of a very difficult childhood, multiple step families that she was a part of. But then in the end, she talks about what a difference it has made with the stepmom who married her
Yes.
dad. And it's just an incredible story that I think is encouraging to adults who are trying to invest in step families and doesn't always go the way they want. So obviously you've listened to it also, it sounds
I
like.
have. And, I tell stepmoms all the time, God always knew that you were going to have this role in these kids' lives. God always knew. You have a very special assignment here. So
Right.
take that seriously.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for joining us, Jan.
Oh, it was fun.
If ladies want to reach out to you, where can they find you?
My email address is jan.mathews@familylife.com. And remember, one T in Matthews. Yes, I married into that. jan.mathews@familylife.com.
That's great.
I would love to hear from everybody out there. I love it when people reach out. I love it.
I love that, and we're thankful for you and the role that you are doing with family life, Jan. Thanks so much for being with me today.
You too, Gayla.
All right. All right. And also, I want to mention our upcoming Blended and Blessed event. It is our premier marriage event specifically for blended family couples. And it's a live stream and a live event on April the 27th, just a couple of weeks away. So I do hope that you will make plans to join us. Ron and I are both speaking at that event, and we would love to have you there. Join us in Dallas for the live event if you live in that area, or also the live stream that can be viewed from anywhere. So just a couple of weeks away, but it is not too late to join us. Go to blendedandbless.com and find all the details about that. And then also, I want to mention our May event. We are going to have author and speaker Kathy Lip joining us. She is the author of But I'm Not a Wicked Stepmother. She is a mom and stepmom to four. There are six in their family. And we're going to talk about managing expectations. That can be a hard one for moms and stepmoms in blended families. And we are going to talk about other things during the month of May, not just Mother's Day, but there's other events that can create stress for us. And so make plans to join us as we talk about just managing expectations and all that goes along with that for moms and stepmoms in blended families. So thank you so much for joining us. We love to have you with us. God bless you, ladies. And, if you're struggling in your blended family with adult kids, remember Psalm 18:25 that says, to those who are faithful, God shows himself faithful. That is a promise, ladies. So keep pressing on, and we'll see you next time.